What's up, everybody? T-Wolves 2016 here, ready for another video. I'm here for another video. And today I wanted to talk about, so last night, the New York Islanders got eliminated from the playoffs. Their record in the playoffs was 4-4. Having swept the Pittsburgh Penguins, they got swept by the Carolina Hurricanes. But as like the namesake of this video will say, I don't think that this season should be considered a loss for the Islanders by any means. If anything, I think this season is more telling about how the Islanders are going to do per next season and the season afterwards, possibly, rather than how they're just going to do this season. So for starters, what am I kind of want to preface this by, I'm saying that this is obviously my opinion, and you are allowed to disagree with it or whatnot. And I think that the season says more about what they can do without this man, the old captain, Jonathan Tavares, than anything else. Everyone picked the Islanders to do horrible after losing John Tavares to free agency to the Maple Leafs, and the New York Islander fans and the faithful of the New York Islanders were not happy with how he left or that he left. I can't exactly blame them, but when you look at how they did this year, it's hard to say that they really came out on the bad end of it, on the bad end of things. The Isles finished 48-27-7 with 103 points. Now, if we take a quick look over here at the standings, the division-wise, the Toronto Maple Leafs finished 46-28-8 with 100 points even. So without the Toronto Maple Leafs, with all the superstar, all the superstar talent they had, as well as John Tavares, adding John Tavares to that, the Islanders still outproduced the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that is something that the Islanders have to commemorate. I think this season is a win, regardless of the fact that they didn't make it past the second round. I think this season is a win for them because it showed that they don't need a star player. I mean, one of the main reasons why I was saying that Vegas was so good last year was they were never reliant on a star player. They had a bunch of mid-range players, and most of the players that, admittedly the team had probably given up on for some reason or another. Either they weren't producing the way they needed to, or the team just didn't find a role for them. And so the expansion draft came around, and they're like, hey, Vegas, take a couple draft picks, and here you go. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, give you a couple draft picks and go, here you go. Here's this William Karlsson kid who's never done much of anything. I think prior to that, he'd never scored more than 15 points in his entire career. And then he goes out and almost leads the league in goals and points. A little bit of a regression this year, but I think that's kind of what the Islanders are kind of dealing with now. Matt Barzell is looking to be an absolute stud, and he's not having to live in the shadow of John Tavares. He has plenty of veterans on that team like Leo Komarov, Josh Bailey, and others to look up to when things are going south, so he can have some veteran leadership. But I think the main turning point and the main thing that helped turn around this Islanders team had been the goaltending. The goaltending was absolutely amazing this year from the New York Islanders. Robin Lehner finished 25-13-5. In 46 games played. He had a .213 goals against and a .930 save percentage with 6 shutouts. Now, if anyone's curious, those 25 wins rank him 18th in the NHL. Now, you wouldn't think that that's anything or that means anything, but take a look at his other stats. A .930 save percentage is second in the NHL. In the entire NHL, Robin Lehner finished second in goals against average. He had a .213 goals against average, which was third in the league. And his 6 shutouts in the NHL was tied for fourth. And you know who he's tied with? None other than the potential Vezina winner and Vezina candidate, Andrei Vasilyev of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But that wasn't all. You look at those stats and you're like, okay, he had a pretty good season, but how did his backup do, or how did the other half of the tandem do? Thomas Greiss finished 23, 14, and 2 with a 228 goals against average, which was good enough for fourth in the National Hockey League, a 927 save percentage, which makes him tied for fourth in the National Hockey League, and 5 shutouts. Combined, Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss have 11 shutouts combined throughout the season. I think that's really impressive, especially when you look at, how nobody expected these guys to really, do very well at all. And yet here we are. Here is, and if you look at some other team stats, you kind of understand why. You can see why Carolina was able to capitalize on a lot of the opportunities they were given. Their power play percentage was good for 29th in the league. Their penalty kill percentage was 16th in the league. Their face-off win percentage was 29th in the league. Their shots against per game was 12th in the league. Their point percentage, so their wins per games played, is good for 5th in the league. The Islanders were an amazingly good team this year, and I think they showed that they don't need a John Tavares to be able to do good or win. I think this season is more telling than anything else about how well, the Islanders can do and how good this Islanders core is. Barry Trotz is doing an amazing job over there, and I think he's going to continue to do an amazing job with his stint with the Islanders. I still think the Islanders are a couple key pieces away from being able to make a legitimate Stanley Cup run or be legitimate Stanley Cup favorites. I think this year they are at a solid dark horse to win the Stanley Cup. I didn't think after they won against Pittsburgh and how well Robin Lehner played, I had nothing but admiration for the Islanders. I was like, I didn't expect this team to, I expected that if the Isles were going to win against Pittsburgh, they were going to have to take it. They're going to have to go to 7 games, and it would be like an overtime kind of flunky goal, And then the Islanders just won 1. Then they won 2. Then they won 3. And then they won 4. And before we knew it, they were off into the second round after having swept the Pittsburgh Penguins, who had won 2 of the last 3 Stanley Cup championships. And those were 2 in a row, by the way, in 17 and 16. 2018 is obviously the Caps. So, but either way, and now let's look at their team leaders to kind of get a full grasp of what's going on. Team leader in points was Barzell with 62, followed by Josh Bailey with 56, and Brock Nelson with 53. Anders Lee led the way in goals with 28, followed by Brock Nelson with 25 and Casey Cizikas with 20. Assists, or the Apple leader, was Matthew Barzell, followed by Josh Bailey, followed by Brock Nelson, and who was tied for third with Ryan Pulock. So if we look at the Islanders season, many say that, it's a loss and that it's heartbreaking, and by no means is at least the heartbreaking part. The heartbreaking part is very true. You can't take everything this team has been through in the last year or two and see how well they do this season and say that that's not heartbreaking. At least the Isles made it to the second round. That's all I can say. I'm not throwing shade on John Tavares. John Tavares is a great player, and I believe that in professional sports, to some degree, you need to be a little bit selfish at times when it comes to how you want to do your career. At the end of the day, it's your decision, and the fan base will love or hate you, and probably in some cases both. That being said, I don't agree with how Tavares left. I think, it would have been nice if Tavares had said, hey, I don't really feel like I'm going to re-sign here. I just thought I'd let you know, so at least the Islanders could have traded him and gotten something in return. Although that could also be on the Islanders for not just trading him and saying, we don't really know if we have a chance to sign you. We're going to trade you and then take a chance in the offseason that we could sign you. But at the very least, we get something in return. So I think it's a little bit of both as it pertains to, who falls the blame. The Islanders fans are definitely not happy with John Tavares, and that was clear when Toronto visited New York for the first time this season. And he was serenaded by boos and chants like, "We don't need you, Barzell's better," and other things like that. But before I get completely off topic and start talking about making this the John Tavares episode, I'm going to get back on point. Sorry, I started it and then completely forgot where I was going. The Islanders have nothing to be ashamed of. They played their hearts out and they just ran into a really good team in the playoffs. That's going to happen every year. Every single year, you're going to run into good teams in the playoffs. And, you'd be, kind of dumb to, assume that your team from the get-go is just going to make it straight to the finals. I mean, I have friends who get mad at me because whenever they're like, yeah, we're going to make it to the second round, or we're going to make it to the finals, or we're going to win the cup this year, I'm like, I'd never really count my chickens before they hatch, especially, because I understand that the playoffs are crazy. I mean, if you had told me before the start of this playoffs that none of the division winners would make it out of the first round, I would have told you were crazy. If you had told me that the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning would get swept in the first round, I wouldn't have believed you. By the Columbus Blue Jackets, of all people. They're people who were notorious for never making it out of the first round, and they got swept by them. So, that being said, I think the Islanders have a very, very bright future with Barzell and Robin Lehner at the helm. Robin Lehner is just a really feel-good story, I believe. Looking at his battle with depression and bipolar disease and all that kind of stuff, bipolar disorder, sorry. I think watching him kind of do as well as he did and, having a really bounce back year, it made me feel really good just because, as someone who I deal with depression, among other things. I don't deal with bipolar disorder, but I have friends who do, and it's a scary thing to see. And so to see him be able to kind of combat that and get the help he needs and come back and put this kind of effort in, top 5 in the league in goals against, say, top 4 in the league in, shutouts, goals against, and save percentage, as well as top 3 with goals against and save percentage. And his backup, Grice, did really good. I really would have liked to see Halak on this team. I really would have liked to see how Halak would have done as a backup to Lehner. But either way, that being said, Isles fans, I don't really know if there are any Isles fans who watch this, who watch me. You probably watch the other guys like TheHockeyGuy. I know VGK Coverage occasionally covers other teams, not very much though. It's typically other teams that make trades with Vegas or other teams that have players. Arcade Regiment makes some really, really great content. If I'm forgetting anyone, I'm sorry. Nick's Blackhawk Talks, usually, again, mostly Blackhawks Talks, but again, he occasionally dabbles in other teams. So that being said, I don't know if there are any Isles fans who watch me, but if there are, take this to heart. You have nothing to be ashamed of from this season. You have done an amazing job, and your team has a very bright future. In fact, I might do a video ranking every team, ranking like the top 10 NHL teams with the brightest future ahead of them. The 10 teams to look out for in the next upcoming seasons, because I think the Isles are definitely a strong candidate for number 1 if I make that list, because they have such a bright future ahead of them. They are a very good young team. They have a lot of veteran leadership. I think there are 1 or 2 pieces, like I said earlier, I think they're 1 or 2 pieces away from having a legitimate Stanley Cup contending team. But with Barry Trotz at the helm, there's very few things I'm willing to write off against this Islanders team. This Islanders team is going to be great. That being said, thank you so much for watching the video. If you've made it all the way to end, please leave a like and subscribe. I don't know if I pointed in the right directions, but hey, forgive me. Cool. I hope you have a great morning, evening, whenever you're watching this. I hope you're really enjoying the Stanley Cup playoffs. I know I am. I'm really enjoying watching, especially with the Blackhawks not being in the playoffs. I kind of have a little bit more free reign to root for whoever I want. I might do a video on, once we reach the conference finals, of matchup analysis and kind of who I think is the favorite going on. But again, that's completely dependent on whether or not my college schedule will allow me to do that. That being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and two pivotal game 5s tonight. Have a good one. Peace.